As you can see, I've gotten into the studio tonight. Turns out that Adam wasn't able to be here tonight. He started off the morning. I guess he bit off all the ears for his kids' bunnies, all the chocolate ears, and he ate them. And he got on a big sugar rush, and he just couldn't concentrate the rest of the day. So he asked me to fly back to Pennsylvania and jump in and do my broadcast here about the imaging session setup for Sequence Generator Pro. I want to be further. I do want you guys to Toga, are we running right? Toga?
Yeah, you're doing good. You're doing good.
Okay. Okay. I want to remind you of a few things. Let me get up here. Let me get up here. I'm confusing myself. We are.
You're doing good.
Okay.
You're doing good.
Okay. Okay. I want to remind you of things. Let me get up here. Astro Imaging channel page, you will find a place where we can type
Alex,
in things and tell us what's going on and all that other stuff. We're there, astroimagingchannel.com, and take advantage of it. Okay?
Alex?
Now, I'm going to get out of here.
Alex?
Yeah.
Turn off your sound on the YouTube feedback.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Toga.
Turn off your sound.
Okay, we should be okay now.
Turn off.
Are we okay?
Feedback.
Okay, hang on a minute.
Feedback.
Okay, hang on a minute. Testing 1, 2, 3. We good?
Yes, sounds much better. Sounds much better.
Okay. Let's get back to doing this. Make it look good. A couple of weeks ago, I did an imaging Messier marathon. That means that I tried to get all 110 objects in the same night. It's kind of a stupid pet trick, meaning it doesn't really have any purpose in life. There's no real reason to be going out doing crazy things like this, except that while I was doing it and while I was getting ready for it, I realized that, man, I'm learning an awful lot about Sequence Generator Pro and the new release of Sequence Generator Pro. I mean, let's face it, we all tend to do what we tend to do, and we do the same things in every imaging session, one after another, trying to get things done right and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, everything's cool, and we learn how to, we never really push ourselves to learn some other things. Well, in trying to get all 110 objects in the same night, I learned a whole lot of things about Sequence Generator Pro, and I thought it might be a good show. Now, it turns out that I've got, I think, more than an hour's worth of content here, but I don't think I've got 2 hours worth of content. So we have plenty of time to do everything here. So go ahead and ask your questions. Anything about Sequence Generator Pro, just go for it. And we're gonna have as much fun as we can today with, you know, Adam not being in his own kitchen. So I think we got everything straightened out. And the first thing you need to consider is, what decisions do you have to make before you even start Sequence Generator Pro? When you look at this sequence thing here, you see that there's a whole lot of check marks and boxes and stuff like that. And frankly, if you don't know how to handle this stuff, go back and learn that first. don't try to do all this goofy stuff that we're about to do until you learn the first stuff. There is what I think is a wonderful tutorial out there about living with Sequence Generator Pro in the first week. If you haven't seen it, tell them, make a comment over in the comment section over there, and we will, I'll give you the link to it, and then you can take it from there. Okay. But before you sit down to make any imaging session, you've got to worry about the weather, time, what your color plan is going to be, your target scale, the number of subs you want, your altitude, your pointing. There's just all sorts of stuff that you need to worry about. And we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons and pluses and minuses of all that decision as we go along here. Oh, by the way, Adam really is okay. He didn't have a sugar rush. He probably did steal some and eat some bunny ears today that he shouldn't have eaten, but it was just a joke. Okay. Adam had a family thing and he had to be at, so he said, okay, I'll let the kids play instead. And that was really me kind of cheap photoshopped into his kitchen. I didn't actually fly back to Pennsylvania. I have to say that. I'm sorry, I have to say that, but believe it or not, there are probably some people looking at it and says, hey, he's probably the guy that faked the moon landing. Anyway, first thing you need to worry about is the weather. You need to know if you can image tonight at all. When is the good time to be imaging? What type of objects are there that are going to be good tonight? For instance, star clusters, they need pretty good seeing. If you're taking a picture of an open cluster, you want tiny little stars. If you're taking a picture of a globular cluster, hey, you want tiny stars, even if you're taking a picture of a big nebula. But in a big nebula, it's not quite as big a problem. So you have to ask yourself the question, like we always use our Attila Donko's clear sky chart, and from his chart you can look up and see for your own observing location what the weather is going to be like. Where's my cursor? There it is. When it's going to be dark, and you see it's going to be dark by about 7-8 o'clock this Thursday or this Friday night, but you can see that the seeing is not going to be all that good because it's not dark. The darker it is, the better it is. You can also see that right around that time of the night, we're going to have a heck of a wind problem coming up through here. And so this is probably not a good time to be imaging, but after about 10 o'clock at night, yeah, we'll probably be able to do some imaging. There are some implications of this for one-shot color or LRGB imaging. For instance, you can sneak in some one-shot color and you can sneak in some sub-exposures from LRGB imaging in a short period of time, but you can't get a whole long imaging run of either one. And if you can only do something in a short period of time, one-shot color may be the way to go. Now, it may be a moot point because let's face it, most of us don't have 2 or 3 or 4 cameras to put up there and we say, oh, I think tonight's a one-shot color night. Yet we don't do that. But there are some things, and I'm going to talk about the advantages of one-shot color over LRGB in situations where there may only be a little bit of time to image. Now, I also said I was going to talk about the Messier marathon. And fact of the matter is that between the time it gets dark on one night, about 7-8 o'clock at night, and the time it gets bright the next morning, it doesn't really matter what the weather is going to be if that's the night you picked your Messier marathon. As long as it's clear, you're not going to worry about whether the seeing's particularly good or bad. Remember, all the pictures that you're taking for this Messier marathon are going to be put into a poster, something like this. And that poster, I think, is 17 by 30 or something like that inches across. And any one picture is so tiny and it's got lots of noise in it and everything else like that. But remember how proud you were of the first time you took a picture on the back of your DSLR and you looked at it and it was such a good picture. And then you blew it up to computer screen size and it was a really poopy picture. But down on, so from that point on, you decided, I'm just going to look on the back of my monitor on my view screen. Well, the same thing's happening with your Messier marathon. If you decide to take 110 and put them all up at the same poster at the same time, well, it's okay because they're all little baby shots and you don't have enough, you can't see the blurriness, you can't see the noise. So enjoy yourself if you're going to be taking a Messier marathon. Okay. Tyranny of time. I like that expression, the tyranny of time. It's really bossy and nasty. Um, so um, there are lots of, when is dark? There are three different kinds of times to look at here: sunrise and sunset. Yeah, but I mean, the sun's already set here in California, and yet it's going to be light for another, well, 45 minutes at least. I can go out right now and drive my car here in California for about, well, all the way till about, it says here 1924. So yeah, I can drive my car for a while here yet without my lights on. All right. Then there's this thing called nautical twilight. That's where I can still see the horizon. I can still see the break in the horizon. If I were out sailing on a boat and I wanted to get a fix, I could see the horizon and where the star is at the same time. And it's not till astronomical time at 2022 that it actually gets dark enough to be called night. So from 1848 to 2022, that's a long time. And the same thing happens in the morning, the opposite side of it, of course. Um, from sunset to almost 12 hours, 11 and 58 minutes. But night itself is only about 9 hours long from 2022 to 522. So you've got about 9 hours to image. And if you're taking real images, not doing this dog and pony trick, trying to catch all 110 in the same night, you don't even want to use all those 9 hours on any given object. And you'll find out why when we talk about altitude and things like that. However, this twilight time, this 45 minutes, an hour, particularly from here to here, it's good for a lot of things. You can focus your scope, you can do some plate solving, you can actually take pictures of some bright objects, particularly if they're behind the dark sky. And I'll get to that in a second. You can also pick up some flats and darks at this point in time if you choose to. One other thing you have to realize is that at sunset, it's dark overhead, but it's still light on the horizon. So you could actually be taking some pictures in the east, and you could actually get your imaging running already, even though it's not officially night. That's because over in the east, it's dark. It's over in the west that it's not dark. Unfortunately, now, if you're taking your 110 objects, you have to realize that you got to start in the west because that's where the west objects are going to be. Another thing to think about, M30, the last of the 110 objects that one could get in a Messier marathon, it doesn't rise for something like 20 or 40 minutes or something like that after the preceding object rises. So there is a gap of time, and you have to figure out all of that stuff. One other thing you have to figure out is there are certain time wasters going on. For instance, when I took by the way, this was not out of this M45 here was not out of my night where I took all 110 objects 6 or 8 years ago, whatever that was. That night we had from 7:54 to 5:28, a total of 574 minutes. 574 minutes divided by 110 objects gives you 313 seconds per object. Now, I decided that I needed 90 seconds of luminance and 40 seconds of R, G, and B binned for each one. And with the QSI 583, the old 583 it was too, they were really slow in downloading. And so there was at least 65 seconds of downloading. So I've used up 275 seconds just imaging. Okay. And imaging and downloading and filter changing and all that other stuff. Not counting focusing, not counting aiming, not counting targeting. I got 38 seconds per object on average. That causes you to look at what your time wasters are. Downloading wastes some time. The movement of your scope from one object to the next will waste time. Plate solving certainly takes up a lot of time. Focusing takes about a minute and a half every time I run a SGP focus system. Dithering, guider settling. If you are taking 1 minute exposures, can you really afford to have 5 or 8 seconds of settling time each time you dither? There are, particularly with some modern cameras, there are people taking hundreds of 30-second exposures. That's great if that's what they want to do, but if every time they have to dither, it takes 3 to 5 seconds to get that image back, they're losing to get the telescope centered and the guider settled again. They're losing a lot of valuable time, losing 10% of their imaging time to just dithering. So you've got to make some choices here about how often you want to dither. Or in the case of the Messier objects, remember, you're only taking 45-second exposures. Maybe you don't need to be guiding or dithering at all. The other thing about dithering, hey, you don't need to dither at all if you're only taking one exposure of each one. Now, remember the dog and pony tricks where you're taking all 110 in the same night, you're only getting 2 or 3 pictures of each one at the most if you're taking one shot color, and you're only getting one subframe of each if you're taking LRGB. So dithering is just not an issue. But remember, I'm not presenting this to encourage people to go out and try to get all 110 objects in one night. I'm doing this so that you'll see some of the things you can do, but in SGP. But we have to ask some of these questions before we go any further. By the way, if you yourself have questions, please type them in. Tolga is over there while Adam's left us in the playhouse alone. Tolga's over there checking, and he's going to interrupt me if you've got any questions that are pertaining to the topic. And so go ahead. One other thing that wastes time when you're using Sequence Generator Pro, I shouldn't say waste. One of the things that uses time, it's actually quite helpful when you're taking, like grown-ups do, 15 or 20 exposures of the same object, is image history. Image history takes a downloaded picture. Every time it downloads, it analyzes the picture for the number of stars supported and for the full width half max of the stars, or half flux maximum. I forget which it does. And then it charts them out. And so in the course of the evening, you can see if you're losing your skies, if you're losing your focus, if you're dithering, or if your guiding's gone bad and stuff like that. Extremely useful. It's a good thing. I always keep it around. It tells me where I can junk like let's say I've got in my image history chart, I've got one sub that's really poopy. Well, boom, it's gone. And I just changed the number of images that I'm taking on that so that I get one more. All these things take up time, and you have to consider how you can use them to your advantage. Now, if you are doing the proper things like grown-ups do and imaging, one object a night kind of thing, then none of these things are time wasters. They're all absolutely essential. But if you're doing the 110 in one night, hey, your priorities have to change. Remember, what we're doing here is we're talking about some of the decisions you have to make when you're building a Sequence Generator Pro sequence. And these are the kinds of things you have to deal with. Now, back to the cheap pet tricks here. For the Messier objects, there are some objects that are high in the sky early in the evening, M45, M42, 43. They're up there. They're dark. Even if the western horizon is not yet dark. They also, you can focus on them pretty well. You can plate solve to them pretty well. You can take them before you take those objects over on the western horizon. While you're waiting for it to get dark over there, you can actually grab your M45 picture or your M42, 43 pictures. Okay. Secondly, as you can see, M42, 43, the rule is you got to get all 110 objects in a night. You don't necessarily have to have different exposures or different subframes for each different one. You can combine some objects. I won't talk about too much of that right now. I'm going to hold off because we're going to talk about that later. And you want to minimize meridian flips. If you take the standard list of a Messier marathon, you will find out that it's made for star hoppers. And for star hoppers, you'll put your scope, your big old knob down in the south someplace, and you'll poke around down there for a while, including crossing the meridian a couple of times, because it's no big deal to cross the meridian with a knob. And then you'll go up north and you'll do the same thing, crossing back and forth a few times. Well, that may not be your ideal thing when you're using a big German equatorial mount or something, and every time you go across the meridian, you got to do a whole flip. That's not a good idea. So you need to organize yourself so that you minimize your meridian flips. It's actually not that hard to do, and it's not that critical if you've got a real good mount. It'll just behave properly and stuff like that. Okay. Tolga, are we doing any questions yet?
We're good. We're good. No questions right now. But I had a question.
We're good. Yeah, what's up?
Where is this list that you were talking about? Is there a place
That's
where
in
people look to, like, what is the regular marathon list?
I've got that later on in the show.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And I'll get back to it. But if you're really in a hurry, you go to SED's Messier list, just SEDS Messier list, and it'll pop up.
There is a question that just popped up.
I see Guillermo.
Would a one-shot color camera be better for this application?
Oh, definitely. That is for okay. If we're talking about for Messier marathon, yeah, one-shot color cameras, because then you can take 3 or 4 exposures of 70 seconds each or something like that. There's your 280 seconds, and cool. You've got 4 exposures that can actually be averaged out for noise and stuff like that. That you can't. I mean, 4 is not going to get you that great an advantage, but it's going to cut the noise substantially. Okay, and plus, if a jet flies across one of them, you can throw it out. You'll see during the presentation that one of the problems with doing this is if a jet cuts across your red exposure, you got a jet going across your red exposure because you can't throw out the red exposure. It's you only got one of them. Okay, so yeah, I would say that the priority would be one-shot color, assuming you want color. I've known people that have done the Messier marathon and Alson did it. He's the first person I know that did it. He did it in a monochrome, just gray. And I don't know how many people. I've done it in color or LRGB. I would say that L is rather not essential. I would have been better going RGB rather than LRGB. Remember, I'm talking about little postage size pictures. I can go ahead and screw it up. It doesn't matter. You know, it can be out of focus and it just doesn't show up. Okay. Now, Tolga just commented to Guillermo that this is for imaging all 110. Remember, that was just the excuse to get you here. This is not really about imaging 110 in one night. All the way along, I'll be talking about stuff you do when you're deciding how to make a sequence. And then later on, if I get time, or I'll put it off to next week, I'll show you how to build the actual sequences. Tonight, to start with, I'm just showing you the things you need to worry about when you're deciding to build a sequence. I'm not advocating that you go out and try to do a Messier marathon and grab all 110 objects in one night. That's just a stupid trick that I just wanted to do to see if I could do it. It's been something that's been in my brain for 4 or 5 years, and since I started with SGP, and I finally pulled it off last week, okay, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. Okay, I think I've done that. How are we doing on the questions, Coach?
We're doing good.
Okay, wait a minute. I think there was one. Guillermo, how do you organize your sessions on SGP? Do you create one session per night with, say, 5 objects, or just one section with every? Okay, Guillermo, that's a big question. You are just going to have to decide. There are different people with different personalities. I would say most of us should do either 1 object or 2 objects per night. Okay. That way you can spend a long time on each one. How long does it take for an object to get from 30 degrees above the horizon on one side up to the top and then back over the other side to 30 degrees above the horizon? Practically speaking, that's how much time, I'm getting ahead of myself here because that's later on in the show. That's how much time you have to image. You don't want to image below 30 degrees in either case. So you got from 30 to the top and back down again. Theoretically, to get from 30 to 60 to 90, that's 60 degrees. It takes about 4 hours for a star to move 60 degrees. So you've got about 8 hours. 8 hours on an object. It depends. If you're really good, no, that's not enough. Okay. But for most of us, yeah, you can really get a decent set of data. Therefore, you can image one object. But some of us don't have blessed weather and we're going to miss it. You know, we only got 4 hours before the clouds are going to come in. You might, you might have to spread that 8 hours you need on an object over 2 nights. Another thought is that you image one object while it's up where it belongs, and then it starts going to bed over in the west, starts going to sleep over there, and so you switch over to another object and image it for another 4 or 5 hours. My personal philosophy is that one good object, one good target thoroughly covered in a night is better than 4 or 5 partially covered. However, if I were new at this, I would want to take home from a weekend of imaging 4 or 5 images to process, 4 or 5 targets worth to process. So I might go back to the other way and try to catch 4 or 5 different objects, each of them as they cross over the meridian. Does that kind of answer your question? So it depends on your skill level, and it is a matter of choice. Jamie, would a one-shot color be a better route for this? If you're talking the Messier Marathon, yeah. But if you're talking, well, we aren't going to go into the whether one-shot color is better or not. There are reasons for using one-shot color, and there are reasons for using LRGB with filters, et cetera, et cetera. And you need to do both at one point or another in your life, depending on what you're doing, how you're doing it. Okay. Onward. Oh, son of a gun. Look what the very next question was on the slides. Should you be using one-shot color, RGB, LRGB, or mono? First off, mono makes some really cool pictures, and you can get some really, I mean, if you're using no filters, you can gather light pretty quickly. So you can make some really good, stunning images, gather a lot of photons in mono. One-shot color, you can gather lots of photons in 3 different colors, and that makes it full color. RGB, if you're taking one sub of each, remember it's a little dangerous if you're doing the Messier Marathon. Okay, but an LRGB, the L part gives you much better definition than a simple RGB would in most cases. Folks, we're not going to get too far into that, but before you sit down to write an SGP sequence, you have to decide what kind of camera you're going to use and what your priorities are. Okay. Yeah, as Sergio says, you can do LRGB, and binning the RGB 2 times or 3 times gives you the color values you need. But again, I don't want to go too far into which is the better imaging system. If you're talking the Messier Marathon and you want color pictures, yeah, you go the one-shot color routine. I used a Canon 6D for the last time I tried it. I used a QSI 583 with multiple figures the time before. Okay. Clouds can interrupt the session. If you've got 2-3 hours of imaging and you are using one-shot color, every image you take is a complete image, a complete sub-image in and of itself. You've got as much color data as you're going to get from that one image. So I think Guillermo's saying that he doesn't have much time because the weather here is not good. Okay. And Guillermo's right, spot on. He likes the idea of every time he takes a sub, it's usable. He doesn't have to wait. But that's assuming that what you're going to do is take L, 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 take 12 L's, 12 R's, 12 G's, and 12 B's. And there's nothing in the book that says you have to do that. You can take your pictures LRGB, and that way, after you've taken your first 4 subs, you do have a complete set of a sub image there. Okay, so you've got one complete thing that you could put together, and then you go ahead and you start it again. So, and an LRGB is going to have a lot more color and a lot more exposure value all the way across, greater dynamic range in general than your collection of one-shot color pictures. Okay, so those of you who think that you need a one-shot color picture in the situation that Guillermo is describing, where he's got, you know, clouds come over for a couple hours and they go away, he images as quick as he can, and then he does, then the clouds come back. Try going LRGB, LRGB, LRGB. You do have some problems with that. If it takes you 3 seconds to change a filter, it takes you 3 seconds to change a filter, and you've lost that 3 seconds. Okay, that's you know, if you're taking 30-second exposures, 3 seconds is a tenth of your time. If, however, you're taking 5-minute exposures, which is what I do with my RG and B, it's no big deal. Okay, I take 10 or 15-minute exposures with my L, and then 5-minute exposures with my RGs and Bs. That 3 seconds of changing filter and moving the filter wheel a little bit is just no big deal. So consider whether you want to go LRGB or LLL, RRR, GGG, BBB. Okay. Noise considerations. If you take one long exposure, you're not only going to be overexposed, but you don't have any chance to mix your, to take advantage of the statistical power of combining a number of subs. And so you want to take as many different subs as you can. That's another reason, if you're taking the Messier marathon, where am I? I lost myself. If you're doing the Messier marathon, that's a reason why you might want to use one-shot color, because then you can probably sneak in 4 shots, and those 4 shots can help overcome the noise. However, if you're in the Messier marathon, remember, you're just doing postage size things. You're not going to see the noise, so it's okay. Oh, I think that's what we're talking about. Noise, there's less, noise is not as big a consideration because you've got the small displays. However, if you're taking an RGB or an L RGB and you lose one of those exposures and you've only got one, well, you're going to have a funny color. Okay. So you can't afford to make that decision. Okay. I think we got some questions coming up. I mean, tutorial was you only have to know what the mean value of you. Oh, okay. That's, where are we on that, Tolga?
There was just a conversation going on between a couple of guys. I think the question is, where do you find the mean value on SGP when you're taking exposures? I think that's the question.
You mean for checking your background exposure? The easiest thing to do is to put your, when it downloads from the camera, put your cursor on one of the background areas, and down below you'll see a intensity reading, an I think it's called reading, and from that you can pick it out. I'll show it to you later when I start up SGP. Okay, then I'm going to go on to the next part. Next thing we're going to talk about up here is target scale, or how big the image is. You need to figure out what you're really looking at here. Here's a picture of M40. See that thing right there? That is M40. Here is a picture of M31. And by the way, these are pretty much straight out of the camera from the last time I did the Messier marathon a couple of weeks ago. They haven't really processed them or anything else like that. I can tell you that this image right here is actually, if it were actually processed properly, it would actually be coming up to here and probably down to here and up to here and down to there and a whole lot of other things going on. But I guess what I'm saying is that, hey, there's a big difference in scale, isn't there? And you have to decide how you're going to deal with that. M31 is a whole lot bigger than M40, and you need to do something about that. Now, first time I did the Messier marathon, I actually put a Teleview 85 up on top of my 12-inch, my 10-inch Meade Newtonian, and while the big Newt was taking pictures down below, the and it has fairly good focal length on it. The up above there was I guess it was a 20 DA, or it was a DSLR on my Teleview 85 taking wide field pictures, which is kind of cool. You also have to consider your composition. Composition is, do you want wrong. I was on the wrong computer. Sorry. I've got two computers running so I can read your comments at the same time I'm talking over here. See how I put this like this? That's because I didn't change my rotation at all the whole night. Actually, most people would put Andromeda all the way like this and they'd catch more of it in the frame, and they would be using some kind of focal reducer or a shorter focal length so that they could get more of the galaxy. Okay. Well, I didn't do either of those things. I didn't worry about it. But composition is one of those things you have to worry about in taking real astro images. It's not a big deal when you're taking stupid 110 all in one night. Okay. And how many subs should you take? You should take enough to, in real imaging, you should take enough to reduce your noise. Your noise decreases as a square of the number of subs that you have. The more subs you get, the less noise you've got. Also, the longer subs you've got, you're going to get less noise within reason, because you're going to get a wider dynamic range in general. So it's good to do that. Now, earlier, I mean, this whole thing is about how to set up a sequence. In other words, how many shots should you take? I'm going to say that the minimum number under real astro imaging, what I call normal here, you got to get at least 8 subs of each filter, or if it's a one-shot color thing, at least 8, probably more if it's one-shot color, but at least 8. 12 is better. There are some rejection algorithms, which is what cuts out the noise. And those rejection algorithms depend on having a certain number of subs before they really kick in and they make mathematical sense. So you got to get up out of the noise. At least 8, 12 is better. Some people with really short exposures want to take 100 of them and stuff like that. I'm not into that. Other people are. More power to them. I just don't see the need for it right yet. But if you're doing the marathon, hey, it's not your choice. You don't have any choice about that, because you only have time for one in LRGB. And the way the parentheses around the L is, I'm not sure you need an L when you're doing this. So you can make your RGB exposure a little bit longer. As I've said before, if you're doing RGB and you lose one of the RG or B, you've lost something serious, because you're going to have weird color. And the amount of time you can do any of this is dictated by that tyranny of time. It's going to win. You've got about 9 hours to do 110 objects. That's, what did I say, 311 seconds or whatever that was. But remember, you're showing in there's just little baby tiny things. You're trying to put all 110 on one piece of paper. Nobody's going to be able to see that you're screwed up. You got those little small displays. You'll be okay. So don't worry so much about the noise and stuff like that when you're doing the marathon. You can get by with just one. Where should you be imaging? Let me see something here. Where's my, oops. I should have a chart here. I don't know why it's not here. When you're imaging below 30 degrees, certain things happen. For one thing, the air is disturbed. Okay. Looking straight up, you're looking through one atmosphere. Looking along the horizon, and I've got a beautiful picture that shows this someplace. You'll see it in a minute or 5, or actually probably 20 by the time I get there. And you're looking at 5 atmospheres when you're looking towards the horizon. Okay, and that in that 5 atmospheres below, towards the horizon, every hot pocket, every wind, clouds, moisture, all sorts of stuff is disturbing the air. When you focus on something down there, you're going to get bad focusing. You can't focus very much. The motion is not going to be proper. In other words, if you are using sidereal rate on something that's down on the horizon, it will actually, it won't work. The thing moves at a different rate. The things move at a different rate. When you see the setting sun, what is it? The setting sun set 12 minutes ago. By the time you see it go down, it was already down 6 degrees or something like that, because the atmosphere, and by the way, you'd have to check those numbers. I know it's true. I don't know the numbers on it. The atmosphere refracts the light, and you see the refracted light. You don't see the actual position of the sun. Okay. Under normal circumstances, you want to do your reds down low, because they can most get through that that haze and that mess. Okay, then the refraction. You want to do your luminance, which you're really relying on for the sharpness. Okay, you want to do your luminance when it's up above, when it's up straight up on the transit, when it's as high as it can be. And your green, and then your blue. So a good night of imaging would have half of your reds, half of your greens, half of your blues. The luminance is across the top, and as it's going down on the other side, you'd have the other half your blues, the other half your greens, and the other half your reds. And that way, everything would be about as sharp as you could get them to be, and take advantage of that particular phenomenon. Okay. But during the marathon, screw it. It is where it is, and you got to get moving. You don't have time to play around with it. You don't have time to make any funny decisions about where things should be or are or anything else like that. Okay. Let me see. I got one more area here. Yeah, pointing. Under normal circumstances, you need good go-to. Before you start using your plate solver, you need a good polar alignment. You should fix any cone error. If you've got slop, you should fix that stuff. You've got to do that. You have to have some repeatability. That is, if you tell your scope to go someplace, it goes there. If you've got a sloppy scope, or if you've got flop in the bearings and all that other stuff, it's not going to work very well. So in order to get your imaging sessions to work, you've got to get all that, and you have to be able to work a good meridian flip. If you can't do that, you're really going to have problems. During a marathon, however, it doesn't matter very much. You don't have much time to worry about this kind of stuff. There are some time implications for using plate solving during a Messier marathon. If every plate solve takes a minute and a half, because you got to take a picture, analyze the picture, adjust the frame, move it again, maybe if you take 3 or 4 tries, it's going to take a minute and a half to pull off a plate solve. If you can't afford to have a minute and a half very often. Now, there's a couple things you can do. One is make sure that your scope is built right. Make sure your mount's built right and everything. You don't flop and stuff like that. 2 is, instead of plate solving for every target, I mean, dude, ladies, if you don't trust your mount enough to kind of get it in the field of view for our purposes during the Messier marathon, you need to work on your mount. That's simple enough. Okay. So you can do something like every 10 or so objects, every 45 minutes or something, go ahead and refocus or replate solve again, and make sure that your mount hasn't gotten sloppy in the time. Okay. And another thing is, there are times when you're going to do a multiple objects in exactly the same field of view. And you probably then really need um, you the video the at that point you really need a good plate solve. Okay, how are we on questions so far? Toga, wake up.
I don't see any new questions, so you can continue on the
Okay.
presentation. I was going to add something.
Zach, I'm going to disagree with you on plate solve or on focusing. You do need. Well, it depends. My one of my scopes, yeah, you need focusing regularly. Another one of my scopes, no, it can go all night without ever really losing focus on anything. It's got a temperature compensated focuser, and it don't move anyway. Every degree it moves like 1/5 of its critical focus zone. So that's really not much of a movement in the course of a night. And that's the one with the temperature compensated focuser on it. So, but it might be good every hour or so to refocus. Now, yeah, it's a minute and a half, but it's worth it every now and then. A lot of these things, when you're doing this dog and pony trick where you're just trying to do a Messier marathon as quickly as possible, um, yeah, I understand that you're going to get poopy pictures and they're not as going to be as good as if you really did it. But that doesn't mean they have to be completely bad. Okay. You can go ahead and do some of these things. It's a function of how much time this stuff is taking compared to the amount of time you're gathering photons. Okay. Now, folks, that's pretty much the first half of the show. This other stuff slide is about getting questions. I want to make sure that we've got all um, I want to make sure that we got all the questions going. So I'm going to show you something. Let me see. Yeah, that's what I'm going to
Alex,
show you next. Yes.
I was going to say, I guess you can increase the error factor for your plate solving too, correct?
That's true. Well, in some cases you can. Depends on what you're going to be doing. I've got an example when we actually get down to doing this. I've got an example of putting 65, 66 in the same field of view. And if you do that, you better be pretty dead on because one's at one edge and one's at the other edge in my particular scope. Now, if your field of view is wide enough that 65 and 66 or 81, 82 or any of the other ones that you're combining easily fit, yeah, just make your acceptability range wider in your plate solver. Okay? That makes sense. Just as Tolga just said. Okay, Jamie, if you've only played around with SGP, is a Messier marathon sequence something? No, it's not something you should play with. Okay, you got a little pit bull out there. You don't play with him. All right, no, I'm joking. I'm joking. You play with your pit bull however you like. No, what I'm saying is, um, this is one of those things where you can learn a lot. If I were to just give you the sequence, I mean, you could use the sequence that I've got. I could just send it to you, put it up on the box, and you could just download it. Then what point? You haven't learned any of this stuff. The whole point of doing the stupid pet trick was to learn the stuff. You know what I mean? It wasn't to get 110 objects. It was to learn how to get the 110 objects. Okay. Um, and okay, I think I'm going to end the night if you don't mind. We've used up 50 minutes of our supposed hour. I'm going to end by showing you a video of the last time I did this, which was not using Sequence Generator Pro, but it's kind of a kick. And then when we come back next week, I will real quickly review all the stuff that we just did, and I will actually build a few sequences, and we'll talk about all the stuff that I just talked about. We'll talk about how it shows up. Is that okay with everybody? I hope so. I don't know how you answer if it isn't, but here we go. This was the night of March 21st, 22nd, 2012, out at Goat Mountain. I took a bunch of pictures. And here they come. I'm going to be talking along the way here too. The first object, very strong. Last object, notice how it's kind of moved. Okay, that's because we don't track that low. Here's that chart of the times I told you about.
Alex, is there audio with that video?
And you can see what time everything was, what the object was, and all that other stuff. Another satellite track, combined picture and put together. Usually, remember what I told you about if you get
Alex,
something, throw it out. Well, you'll see these messes up later on up when it's their turn. They just stay there. You don't have any choice about it. I think that was this one down there. You'll know that you're in here occasionally. SLR was just up taking pictures. The one I used, CCD autopilot, wire everything. So what I would do was move the scope, the autopilot, would just take a quick 10 second, I could see something. You know, there was time to make them. I took all 100. I slept for about 3 hours, got up and so I slept through the whole. Yes, I can hear you. Tolga, is that you?
Yeah, I was saying that when you were playing that video, it was really choppy. I was trying to interrupt you, but I don't think you could hear me.
Having a problem, Tolga? Are we having a problem? Because it looks like it was back. It's what it. Okay, that was back. Let's see. Hang on a second. Doesn't to do. Yeah, I don't have a separate video for it over here. Okay, so we're gonna skip that. Maybe I'll figure it out for next week. Maybe I won't. Now we've used up. Oh, where am I? I want to get back to here, and then I want to start my. Okay. To real briefly go through the rest of the stuff, and we'll do this again, but rule number one is you have to set up your sequence so that it works. You must know how to get it to work. That video you didn't see just now. By the way, Tolga, we're going good again, right?
Yeah, we're back to normal.
Okay.
It was just that video.
Yeah, it was just that video that wasn't working. Okay,
right.
That's too bad. It was a cute video. Okay, and you know what? We actually tested that last week, and we thought it was working. There are some things you have to do in Sequence Generator Pro. The last time I did this in 2012. It took me about 3 months of practicing it and you know, try, and I really rejected what I was doing because it wasn't working. I tried, I thought maybe I could do it this way, and I tried it, and no, it didn't work. And I tried to do it that way, and it didn't work. So there was about 3 months, and then finally, in about the 4th month, I figured, okay, I'm going to use CCD Commander or whatever it was, autopilot, I forget now. And I'm going to use this and that. And this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm actually going to check off the list. And I figured, okay, that works. And so I sat down on Thursday night of a 4-night weekend, and our club's Messier marathon was going to be on Saturday night. And so I was on Thursday night, and I figured, okay, I'm going to try to get 15 or 20 of them done. And if everything's going good, then I'm happy. And so I started working on it, and I checked off the first one. Hey, I got the first one. Cool. Second one. Yeah. Oh, great. Third one, fourth one. I got to about 15. And I go, okay, it's so good. You know, it's 9 o'clock in the evening or something like that, and everything's going fine. And I just said, why should I stop? And I kept going, and I got it. I got it all. The next night we had an in-service, not an in-service, an outreach down to Joshua Tree. So I had to drive down to Joshua Tree and, you know, entertain the public with the big daub and stuff like that. And a couple of people tried to do the same thing, the Messier marathon, and didn't make it because of the weather. And the next night didn't even, yeah, the weather, they got partway into it again, missed because of the weather. In other words, what you would have seen just now, had our audio visual support worked out, was the result of a practice session that I just decided never to stop, and I just kept going on it. Okay, so practice, practice, practice. All the stuff you have to practice out. Don't expect to sit down and do one of these things, no matter what. You're going to have a good user profile all set up. Next week, I'm going to show you how to select programs, how to select your targets in real life. Okay, not just in doing the Messier marathon, but I'm going to, oops, wrong computer. I'm going to tell you about Astro Planner and Deep Space Object, or Deep Space Object Browser, DSO browser, and I'm going to show you some examples of how to do that. I'm going to show you how to build up your Messier list, how to rank them and stuff like that. I'm going to show you actually how to build a sequence, any sequence, and how to fill it out completely. Some suggestions for building the sequence for a Messier marathon, and how to arrange your targets and stuff like that in general. Along the way, we're going to be playing with a whole lot of stuff in Sequence Generator Pro, who aren't going to be, well, you can always be back here, can't you? Oh yeah, I want to come here. Hang on a minute. Yeah, that's our website from our club. This is the Messier marathon list, and messier.seds.org extra marathon. Just Google SEDS marathon list, and that's the list of marathon objects. Here is a chart we're going to use to find out where we can group things. Like you can see 8182, where, well, you should be able to see 8182. That's Ursa Minor. Where is it? Right there, 8182. And this mess, obviously, you can group some stuff. Then we were going to look into deep space objects. And so we were going to do, I think we've pretty much run out of time, so I'm not going to go any further on all that stuff. Okay, do we have any questions out there?
No, we don't.
We're good?
No further questions.
Okay, well then let me, oh, wrong computer. Let me get back to the studio here. Going to be it for the week then. Be sure to catch up. Remember, you can save all the chat that we just had, all the questions that were there and any answers that came up. So, you know, we'll see you back next week, and we'll do the second half of this stuff where we actually start Sequence Generator Pro and go and do all that stuff. Okay. That's it for tonight, assuming I can figure out how to close this thing off. How do I do that? Where's Adam when you need him? Let's see, come over here. That didn't work. Okay. Hey, how do we go, like, how do we end the session? There we go. Stop broadcast. Goodbye, everybody. We're going to stop the broadcast.